2022 is really a big change from 2019, which was the last time we did some walks in the inner city. Primarily because a lot of these buildings actually lost their tenants as a result of the lockdowns. A lot of people were moving into working from home or a kind of a hybrid model. So the major tenant of this building, for example, Lumley, took the naming rights off the building, and they're currently trying to lease some of the space in the building. And the art collection, which was put in here in 2005 by Trish Clark, who was working as a consultant, was part of what adds value for tenants. So it's actually used as a kind of selling point for coming into this building. It's an amenity. But the important thing about it, from my point of view, is that the reason it's here in the first place, and the owners and developers of the site purchased the artworks, is because they were a condition of the resource consent that they had to provide public amenity in the city to compensate for what was being lost. And what was being lost in the case of this building was sunshine and air, because the height of this building to 24 stories exceeds the height restriction for the inner city. So in order to get that extra level, those extra floor levels, they had to put the cafe in, provide public space, maintain a public thoroughfare which is open from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m, which goes through the centre of this building down to Fort Street, and the 5 artworks that are in the foyer, which is sort of points of interest for anybody coming into the space. They're very valuable artworks, and I would say that I don't know the exact budget for this fit out, but I would say each of these works was probably a $100,000 work when they were put in 2005. It's the biggest Stephen Banbury I've ever seen in my life. It's a whole wall of Stephen Banbury's work on copper, which is a valuable material. This is the most enormous Jim Spears work, light boxes, that I've ever seen. The 2 overseas artists, Nikki Savas, the sort of polka dots that hang in the window, and the John Armlader, those are very valuable works. They're kind of they're not blue chip in the sense that we think about Colin McCann or those sorts of artists, but they are very valuable, kind of formalist works which fit a corporate environment particularly well. You'll notice that they're not representational, they're all abstract arrangements of colour and light, and they're working with a space to a large extent. So this one at night is just fabulous because you can see it from every direction. It really addresses the corner here on Shortland Street, and where I live across the road in the Shortland Flats. It's just beautiful at night to see this staying on 24/7. Of course, they also commissioned the lovely Po Whenua by Lionel Grant, which is the bronze Kaitiaki figure that's standing outside, which is like a guardian figure for this particular area. So there was a lot of thought given to addressing the streetscape and also welcoming people in, I think. But not enough people know that they're welcome. And the thing about these spaces is that they are, in a sense, public-private spaces. So we should be using them more. We should be feeling like we can come in here and settle down and use the free Wi-Fi and so on. But of course, the corporates that have occupied the building wouldn't necessarily want that, but it is actually a part of the resource consent that the public is welcome in the space, in these foyer spaces. I was deeply shocked when I heard that the BNZ collection was going up for auction, because that was one of the places I used to take people to on my corporate art tours. I did a little tour which was called Behind Closed Doors, and we used to go there and go up to the private banking chamber, and there was a whole room hung with these amazing works, and the bank seemed to enjoy having people members of the public come in and look at what was there. So I was very shocked to hear that was going to all be sold, and that certainly the purpose of that collection in its initial when it was initially set up was actually to enrich people's lives who were working in the bank. So it was a hard-working decor collection, if you like. So it went into people's offices. And I think the Bank of New Zealand realised not so many people, again, coming into work, not so much need for office space. Here they had this massive asset which was costing them a lot to insure. As we found out, it's worth half of it was worth $13.5 million. So what was the value for them in holding on to that asset that was going to be an ongoing expense to insure? And had it been a New Zealand bank, I like to think that they might have seen a value in it being a collection of the 1980s that was kind of like an archive of what was important then. It's on the cusp, those works are sort of on the cusp between modernism and postmodernism. It was a really interesting moment, and Peter McLeavy, who assembled it, really chose wisely to represent what was going on. And this is going to be like that. These works are sort of plumbed into the walls. So in 50 years' time, when we come back, we're going to see a snapshot of the early 2000s. That's how these collections work. They are a kind of an archive. But you know, Spark has done the same. They've sold the Telecom collection, which was assembled by Rod Dean in Wellington. So these were corporate collections that were essentially put together to provide a kind of also educational function, but also to provide staff with a kind of incentive to come to work and, you know, to enjoy their surroundings. But on the positive side, there are a number of businesses that are actually going into art collecting, and there are some in Auckland that have been in the art collecting business and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future, like the Macquarie Bank, which is an Australian bank, and they have 40 offices throughout the world. They have 2,000 artworks in rotation. So their Macquarie in Auckland has works that are on display all the time that you can go and see. And they see it as part of their role to actually support emerging artists. And I think that's a great initiative. So they don't wait until something's worth, you know, it's got the blue chip kind of stamp to it. They start out when people are really young, and they have a competition which people can enter, and then they acquire the winning work from each year's competition. So their work is a sort of an archive too, because a lot of those people go on to have spectacular careers. And I have to say, even though they're an Australian bank, they brought a lot of New Zealanders. They've got Saskia Lake in the collection, Richard Lua. So they've got really outstanding examples of New Zealand artists who might have had Australian dealer representation, which has got them into that bank collection. Possibly what we can imagine happening in the future is that rather than the artworks being hidden away in offices and being for the decoration really of staff quarters, that we'll see more work in foyers, because people really enjoy coming into spaces where there are artworks. They like a good cafe too, but where there are good artworks, it kind of draws people in and it makes them a more pleasant place to be in. So I'm hoping that instead of this idea of collecting paintings, which are movable objects, we'll see more of this kind of installation art, which is a great opportunity for the artists, to be honest, to work at scale and to do things which are, you know, really remarkable and probably, you know, standouts for their careers.